Worthless parasite. The accusation ripped through the air of the busy garage, sharp enough to cut through the clang of metal. Aunt Martha, her face contorted with fury, shoved a crying Ella forward, pointing a trembling finger at the mechanic, known simply as Ethan. "Look at him!" She shrieked, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Stealing my food to feed this grease monkey." Ella sobbed, her pleading eyes locking with Ethan's. He stood frozen beside a half-repaired engine, grease staining his simple overalls. A storm of helpless anger brewed in his eyes, but his lips remained tightly sealed, his fists clenched uselessly at his sides. Why did this woman despise him so intensely? What secret rendered him utterly powerless in the face of her rage? The grease felt foreign under his fingernails, a stubborn grit that clung despite rigorous scrubbing. Ethan Sterling, known to the handful of people in this dusty corner of the world simply as Ethan, sighed as he wiped a hand across his brow, leaving another dark smudge. He leaned against the grimy wall of Gideon's Auto Repairs, the unfamiliar ache in his muscles, a stark contrast to the plush leather of the boardroom chairs he'd abandoned, trading billion-dollar decisions for stubborn lug nuts and oil changes. It was jarring. He'd fumbled spectacularly with a tire iron just yesterday, earning a dry chuckle from old Gideon himself. An internal sigh escaped him. Some days the irony was thicker than the engine oil. But this life, this rough-edged, anonymous existence, was a deliberate choice. He was a man running not from the law, but from luxury's empty echo. He'd tired of the calculated smiles, the hands that reached for his wallet before they reached for him. Wealth had built walls around him, gilded cages of expectation and deceit. Here, covered in grime, earning barely enough to get by, he hoped to find something real, something untainted by the Sterling name. A genuine connection, perhaps even love, that saw the man, not the millions. His stomach rumbled, pulling him from his thoughts. Lunchtime, that meant the diner down the street. Miller's place. It wasn't fancy, just a simple, clean eatery offering, hearty, no-nonsense food. It was run by Martha Miller, a woman whose stern gaze seemed to follow every crumb dropped, assisted by her quiet husband, Walter, and their daughter, Clara. And then there was Ella Miller, Martha's niece, orphaned young and taken in. Though taken in felt like a generous term. Ethan had watched her move through the small diner with a quiet grace that seemed out of place amidst the clatter of plates and Martha's occasional sharp commands. She worked tirelessly, scrubbing, serving, cooking always, with a diligence that never seemed to quite satisfy her aunt Walter. Her uncle was a man of few words, often observing from a corner booth. His eyes watchful, his presence a subtle weight in the room. Ethan had once overheard Ella tentatively ask Walter about an old photograph, presumably of her parents, only for Walter to curtly dismiss the question, his face closing off like a shuttered window. It left a strange, unsettled feeling. Clara, their daughter, mostly floated through doing the minimum, often casting indifferent or slightly annoyed glances Ella's way. Ethan slid into his usual booth in the corner, the worn vinyl familiar. Now Ella approached, notepad in hand, her eyes a soft, gentle brown, offering a small, almost hesitant smile. It was the only truly warm thing in the place. "The usual, Ethan?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yes, please. Ella rice and beans, the cheapest thing on the menu. Enough to fill the gnawing hunger, but nothing more." She jotted it down, her brow furrowed slightly, a silent question in her eyes. He knew the look she'd noticed. Of course, he was the only regular who never ever ordered meat or anything extra. He always paid in exact change, coins carefully counted out. To her, he was just another struggling worker, barely making ends meet. That was the point, wasn't it? A few minutes later, Ella returned with his plate. Steam rose from the simple meal, but today, nestled amongst the rice and beans, was a piece of savory roasted chicken. Ethan stared at it, surprised. He looked up at Ella, confused. She leaned in slightly, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes darting quickly towards her aunt at the counter. "Just eat," she murmured, a flicker of something. Kindness, maybe pity, maybe shared understanding, in her expression. He hesitated, then felt a strange tightness in his throat. He opened his mouth about to protest or question, but she was already turning away, heading back to the kitchen. He looked down at the plate again. No one had shown him such simple, unasked-for kindness in, well, longer than he could remember. He picked up his fork. That afternoon, something shifted. The food tasted better, warmed by more than just the kitchen stove. He found himself watching Ella, more, noticing the way she carefully wiped down tables, the gentleness with which she handled the plates, the quiet patience she showed, even when her aunt snapped at her. The next day, it happened again. Another piece of chicken, tucked discreetly into his meal. This time, as Ella placed the plate down, Ethan managed a low whisper. "Oh, thank you, Ella. You're sure there's no surcharge for this unexpected generosity?" He felt awkward, unused to accepting help, especially under false pretenses. A tiny, genuine smile touched her lips, lighting up her face for a fleeting moment. "Don't worry about it, Ethan. Just eat before it gets cold." And so a silent routine began. A simple plate of rice and beans, secretly elevated by a piece of meat, a shared glance, a whispered thank you. It became the anchor of Ethan's day, a small beacon of warmth in his deliberately Spartan life. He started looking forward to lunch, not just for the food, but for those brief moments, for the sight of Ella's quiet strength and unassuming kindness. He felt a connection, fragile yet real, forming in the unlikeliest of places. One afternoon, as Ella brought his usual plate, her cousin Clara sauntered past, eyes narrowed suspiciously, as she glanced from the plate to Ella, then back to Ethan. Clara didn't say anything, just gave a slight knowing smirk before moving on. Ella visibly tensed her shoulders, drawing inwards for a moment, before she forced a calm expression, and walked away. The air suddenly felt charged. Later, as Ethan was finishing up, Aunt Martha's voice cut through the diner's low hum, though not directed at anyone in particular. "Wasting food is wasting money," she announced, loudly, polishing the counter with unnecessary vigor. Her sharp eyes sweeping the room before landing, just for a second too long on Ella, clearing a nearby table. Some people need to remember who puts a roof over their head, and food on the table, no room for waste or charity. Here, Ella flinched almost imperceptibly, her back stiffening as she continued her work, her face carefully blank. Ethan felt a surge of protective anger, quickly suppressed. The warning was clear. The simple act of kindness Ella offered him carried a risk, a heavy one, and the watchful eyes in Miller's place missed very little. The fragile connection he'd found felt suddenly terribly precarious. The quiet moments at Miller's place became Ethan's refuge. He started timing his lunch breaks for the lull between the morning rush and the afternoon regulars, hoping for a few extra minutes of Ella's calming presence. Their conversations, though still brief and cautious, began to carry more weight than the clatter of cutlery around them. He learned she had a knack for baking, dreaming quietly of creating delicate pastries far removed from the diner's stodgy pies, a dream she kept carefully hidden from her aunt. She in turn saw a man, Ethan, the mechanic, who seemed determined, who listened intently, whose eyes held a surprising depth, despite the grease smudges on his face. One slow afternoon, as she served him his now customary enhanced meal, he risked a light comment. "You know, Ella," he said, keeping his voice low, "if I keep eating like this, I might lose my struggling mechanic credibility. People will wonder how I afford such fine dining." A genuine soft laugh escaped her, a rare and beautiful sound. "Maybe you just have a very efficient metabolism, Ethan?" She teased gently, the smile lingering in her eyes for a moment longer than usual, before she hurried back to her duties. That brief exchange, that shared moment of lightness, felt like a secret victory against the diner's oppressive atmosphere. But secret victories rarely stay secret for long. Clara watched them. She saw the lingering glances, the whispered words, the way Ella's face softened almost imperceptibly when the mechanic was around. It wasn't just about the extra food anymore. It was the attention Ella received, the quiet respect in the man's eyes. Things Clara, despite being the daughter of the house, rarely felt directed her way. She felt a familiar, sour knot of resentment tighten in her stomach. Why should the orphan girl, the charity case, get anything good, fueled by her own simmering insecurities and her mother's constant complaints about Ella's supposed inadequacies? Clara's observation turned into waiting, watching for the undeniable proof. It came on a busy Friday. Ethan was seated in his usual corner. Ella, balancing plates, carefully slid his meal onto the table. The extra piece of grilled fish nestled beside the rice. Clara, positioned perfectly near the kitchen door, saw it all. Her eyes narrowed in malicious triumph. Mum Clara's voice sliced through the lunchtime chatter, sharp and accusing. "Mum, come here. Look, just like I said. Ella's stealing your food again, giving it to that dirty mechanic." All heads turned. The diner fell silent. Ella froze, the color draining from her face, the plate still half in her hand. Aunt Martha stormed out from behind the counter, her face a mask of fury. She grabbed Ella's arm, her fingers digging in painfully. "Is this true? Are you stealing from me to feed this nobody?" She hissed, her voice trembling with rage. Ella stammered, "No, Aunt Martha, He looked hungry. Liar! Thief!" Martha shrieked, wrenching the plate away. She didn't stop there, ignoring the shocked stares of the customers. She dragged a terrified Ella by the arm, straight out of the diner. "You're coming with me." Ethan shot to his feet, a protest forming. But Martha was already halfway down the street, Ella stumbling behind her. He felt a cold dread wash over him. He followed instinctively, keeping a distance, his heart pounding. Martha burst into Gideon's auto repairs like a whirlwind of fury, dragging Ella behind her. The clanging sounds of work momentarily ceased as all eyes turned towards the commotion. Ethan stopped near the entrance, unseen for a moment. "You," Martha screeched, spotting Ethan emerging from behind a car. Though she didn't know his name, she pointed a shaking finger at him. "You worthless beggar. Leeching off my niece. Eating my food. I run a business, not a charity kitchen for lazy grease monkeys." Her voice echoed in the large garage space. Ethan stepped forward, his hands clenched, his carefully constructed composure cracking. "Madam, there's been a misunderstand." Silence. A new voice cut in cold and hard. Walter Miller stepped into the garage, having followed his wife. He stood tall, his face unreadable but radiating quiet menace. He looked Ethan up and down with undisguised contempt. "My wife warned you. A man like you should know his place. You will stay away from our family. Understand? Don't let us see your face near my niece or my restaurant again." The words were delivered calmly, but held the weight of an undeniable threat, laced with the venom of class prejudice. Ethan felt the sting of public humiliation acutely. He was Ethan Sterling. He could buy this whole block without a second thought. But as Ethan, the mechanic, he was powerless. Silenced by his own disguise, he could only watch his jaw tight with helpless rage as Walter and Martha forcefully pulled a sobbing Ella away. Later that evening, behind the closed doors of the Miller house, the real storm broke over Ella. The public humiliation fueled Martha's rage, while Walter's cold displeasure was perhaps even more terrifying. The sounds were muffled, but the fury was palpable. Ella endured the stinging slaps, the harsh accusations, the bitter reminders of her orphaned status, biting her lip against the pain, tears streaming down her face. She didn't dare fight back. She knew it would only make things worse. When the physical assault finally subsided, leaving Ella bruised and trembling in a corner, Walter stepped forward, his voice dangerously low. "This cannot happen again. Your association with that trash is a disgrace. You need discipline. You need structure." He paused, letting the fear hang heavy in the air. "I've been considering Mr. Harrison's offer. He's a man of substance. Older, yes, but stable. He can provide for you, keep you in line." Ella's blood ran cold. Mr. Harrison, everyone knew about him. Rich, yes, but cruel whispers circulated about how his previous wives had suffered, how the last one had fled in the middle of the night, bruised and broken. Marrying him would be a life sentence, a gilded cage far worse than the one she was already in. "No, Uncle Walter, please," she whispered, her voice choked with terror. "Please don't." Walter's eyes were like chips of ice. "It's decided. It will put an end to this foolishness. Consider it settled. You will behave, or the arrangements will be made very, very quickly." He turned and walked out, followed by Martha, leaving Ella alone on the cold floor, the physical pain paling in comparison to the icy dread gripping her heart. The small flame of hope, kindled by a mechanic's quiet attention and her own secret acts of kindness, had been brutally, terrifyingly snuffed out. She was trapped with the shadow of Mr. Harrison looming over her future, like a gathering storm. The days following the confrontation were thick with unspoken tension. Aunt Martha's eyes followed Ella's every move, sharp and unforgiving. Walter Miller remained withdrawn, but his silent disapproval was a constant chilling presence. Ella moved through her chores like a ghost, the threat of Mr. Harrison hanging over her head. Yet amidst the fear, the memory of Ethan's face, his anger on her behalf, even in his helplessness, was a small, defiant ember of warmth. She knew she had to see him, despite the immense risk. Using the excuse of needing an ingredient from a market further down the street, Ella managed to slip away one late afternoon, her heart pounding, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She hurried towards the alley behind Gideon's Auto Repairs, praying Ethan would be there. He was leaning against the brick wall, his face etched with worry lines that hadn't been there before. The moment their eyes met, the fear and tension melted into a rush of raw emotion. He stepped forward, taking her hands in his grip surprisingly strong. "Ella." He breathed, his voice rough. "Are you all right? They didn't hurt you too badly." Tears welled in her eyes. Tears she'd refused to shed in front of her aunt and uncle. "I'm okay, Ethan. Just scared." "I'm so sorry," he said fiercely, "seeing them treat you like that. If I could have." He trailed off the limitations of his disguise, a bitter taste in his mouth. In that shared moment of vulnerability, the unspoken feelings between them surfaced. "Ethan," Ella whispered, looking up at him when you stood there, "even though you couldn't do anything, It meant everything. He cupped her face, his thumb gently brushing away a tear. Ella, I care about you more than I should. Maybe more than makes sense. His gaze was intense, searching hers. I think I'm falling in love with you. Her breath hitched. Oh, Ethan, she sighed, leaning into his touch. I feel the same, I truly do. For a few precious moments, they simply held each other, finding solace in the fragile bubble of their confessed feelings. Ethan spoke of the future painting, a picture of hard work, saving money, eventually building a life together, free from her relatives. It was a simple dream, built on the foundation of his mechanic persona, yet spoken with utter sincerity. Ella listened, her heart aching with love, and a heavy dose of reality. Ethan, she said softly, pulling back slightly. I believe you, but we need to be practical. You're still finding your feet here. Let's focus on that first. Okay, before we talk about forever. His initial flicker of disappointment faded into understanding. You're right, Ella. Of course you're right, one step at a time. But even as he said it, a new shadow crossed his face. He hesitated, then pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. Speaking of steps, I got this today. Ella took the paper. It was a formal eviction notice. Pay 3 months back rent within 5 days or be out on the street. Her heart sank like a stone. This was devastating. For a struggling mechanic, this was catastrophe. Oh, Ethan. No. Seeing the genuine distress clouding his features, a fierce wave of protectiveness washed over Ella. She couldn't bear to see him suffer more. Back at the Miller house that night, her mind raced. She thought about the pittance she earned. Timidly the next day, she approached Aunt Martha, asking if there was any possibility of an advance. Her aunt had scoffed, lecturing her about managing money and reminding her she was lucky to have a roof over her head. At all defeated, Ella retreated. There was nothing else she could sell, no other way, except one. The thought made her stomach churn, but the image of Ethan, worried and potentially homeless, spurred her on late that night. When the house finally fell silent, Ella crept from her small room. Her hands trembled as she navigated the dark hallway towards Walter's rarely used study. She knew he sometimes kept cash, earnings from the diner he didn't trust banks with. In an old metal box on his desk, the floorboards creaked beneath her bare feet. Every shadow seemed to hold a watching eye. Reaching the study, she pushed the door open a fraction. Moonlight illuminated the desk and the box. Taking a deep breath, fighting waves of nausea and guilt, she slipped inside, lifted the heavy lid, and quickly counted out the notes. Just enough to cover Ethan's rent, not a penny more. Her fingers felt clumsy, slick with nervous sweat. Stuffing the money into her pocket, she fled back to her room, collapsing onto a thin mattress, her heart hammering against her ribs. The next day, finding another opportunity for a hurried secret meeting, Ella pressed the wad of cash into Ethan's hand. Here, she whispered urgently, for your rent. Take it quickly. Ethan stared at the money, then at her face, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. Ella, where did you get this? She couldn't meet his eyes. I borrowed it. From my uncle. She mumbled the lie, feeling like ash in her mouth. His grip tightened on her wrist, gently but firmly. Borrowed, or took. His voice was low-pained. Tears pricked her eyes as she finally looked at him and nodded almost imperceptibly. Disappointment washed over Ethan's features, sharp and clear. He pushed the money back towards her. Ella, my love, I can't take this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Internally, a part of him scoffed at the sheer absurdity. Ethan Sterling, turning down a sum of money that wouldn't even cover the cost of one of his cufflinks yet. In this moment, as Ethan, the mechanic, the principal felt more valuable than all his hidden billions. I know you did this for me, thinking you were helping. But it's wrong. Stealing is wrong, no matter the reason. And the risk. Ella, think, what if Walter finds out? What will he do to you? I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you because of this. His words, full of genuine concern for her safety above his own predicament, cut through her desperation. He was right. The guilt and fear crashed down on her. You're right. She sobbed quietly. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just so scared for you. I know, he said softly, pulling her into a brief, comforting hug. But this isn't the answer. Please, Ella, you must put it back right now, before anyone notices it's gone. Promise me, she nodded, wiping her eyes. I promise I'll do it tonight. That night was even more terrifying than the first. Ella waited until the dead of night, her nerves stretched taut. She tiptoed back to the study, the wad of bills feeling like burning coals in her hand. The house seemed to hold its breath. As she reached the desk and carefully lifted the lid of the cash box, she heard it. A faint creak from the hallway floorboards. Panic seized her. Her fingers fumbled as she shoved the money back inside, not bothering to arrange it neatly. She didn't dare close the lid properly, just lowered it silently as she slipped back out of the room, pressing herself flat against the wall in the shadows. She held her breath, listening. Silence. Had she imagined it? Or had someone been awake? Trembling, she made her way back to her room, the relief of having returned the money overshadowed by a chilling premonition that this wasn't over. The risk she had taken felt heavy, a dangerous secret lingering in the oppressive air of the Miller house. The uneasy peace of the previous night shattered with the morning light. Walter Miller, a man ruled by suspicion as much as greed, made his way to his study. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control, about the unsettling defiance he sensed simmering beneath his niece's quiet exterior. He opened the metal cash box. The money was there. Yes, but it wasn't right. The bills were slightly crumpled, pushed back in haste, not arranged with his usual meticulous order, that combined with Ella's desperate plea for an advance the day before, and her subsequent furtive behavior, solidified his certainty. She had dared to steal from him, even if she'd lost her nerve and returned it. The audacity galled him. He summoned Ella to the living room, his face an impassive mask that was far more terrifying than open rage. Aunt Martha stood beside him, arms crossed, a silent, condemning presence. The cash box in my study. Walter began, his voice dangerously soft. It was disturbed last night. Ella's heart leaped into her throat. I don't know anything about that, Uncle Walter, she stammered, trying to keep her voice steady, her eyes fixed on the floor. Don't you, Walter, stepped closer, invading her space. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His cold contempt was a physical force. Lying suits you poorly, Ella. Just like thievery. I thought the lesson yesterday was clear, but perhaps it wasn't severe enough. Perhaps you haven't been adequately broken. The word hung in the air, venomous and chilling. Ella flinched, shaking her head, mutely tears welling. Her denial only seemed to confirm his twisted assumptions. What followed was not the hot-tempered lashing out from Aunt Martha, but a calculated, cruel punishment inflicted by Walter himself, designed to instill absolute fear and obedience. He spoke calmly while he inflicted pain, detailing her ingratitude, her worthlessness, each word a psychological blow accompanying the physical ones. When it was finally over, leaving Ella trembling and aching on the floor, Walter looked down at her, his expression unchanged. "Mr. Harrison is expecting his bride. The wedding will be in 3 days. There will be no more chances, no more defiance. You will do exactly as you are told." He turned and walked away, leaving Aunt Martha to ensure Ella was secured. This time, the lock on her bedroom door felt heavier, more final. Walter had even nailed a thick board across the small window, plunging the room into near darkness, cutting off her only view of the outside world. Trapped in the suffocating gloom, Ella curled up on her mattress, waves of terror washing over her. 3 days. 3 days until she was handed over to a man known for his cruelty. Yet somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the pain, a tiny spark of defiance refused to be extinguished. She wouldn't let them break her completely. She clung to the memory of Ethan's concerned eyes, the brief moments of shared laughter, the impossible dream of a different life. It was a fragile shield against the encroaching despair. Meanwhile, days bled into one another, and Ethan's worry festered. Ella hadn't shown up at the diner. Aunt Martha and Clara served the customers, their faces carefully blank. When he inquired, offering clipped evasive answers, Martha claimed Ella was unwell, while Clara simply smirked and ignored him. The evasiveness, coupled with the memory of Walter's earlier threat about Mr. Harrison, tightened a knot of dread in Ethan's gut. He couldn't stand it any longer. Waiting until dusk softened the edges of the town, he made his way stealthily towards the Miller house, his senses on high alert. He circled around to the back towards the side where he knew Ella's room was. The room now ominously dark and boarded up. He strained his ears. Was that? Sobbing soft, heartbroken, weeping, drifted faintly through the boarded window. His fists clenched. He stepped closer, tapping gently on the wood. "Ella," he whispered urgently. "Ella, it's Ethan. Are you in there?" The crying stopped abruptly. A faint rustling sound came from within. Then a choked whisper, barely audible through the barrier. "Ethan, is that really you?" Relief warred with fury within him. "Yes." "Ella, what happened? Are you okay?" Her voice came again, thick with tears and terror. "They locked me in Uncle Walter. He found out. He thinks I stole from him. He's making me marry Mr. Harrison. The wedding, Ethan, it's in 2 days. 2 days!" The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. His mind raced break down the door. Too risky, too loud. Call the police. On what grounds? Based on the word of a poor mechanic against a seemingly respectable homeowner. Walter would twist the story, paint him as the troublemaker. He felt the crushing weight of his disguise, the impotence of being Ethan. The mechanic, revealing himself, Ethan Sterling, was the obvious, powerful solution, but the thought gave him pause. How would Ella react, knowing he'd lied to her all this time? Would she see his deception as just another betrayal? The risk of shattering her trust, the only pure thing he'd found, felt enormous. He had to try something else first. Anything else. The next evening, steeling himself, Ethan waited until he saw Walter Miller stepping out to lock the diner. He approached him directly, keeping his demeanor respectful, but firm. "Mr. Miller," Ethan began. "I need to talk to you about Ella." Walter turned slowly, his eyes filled with cold dismissal. "I thought I told you to stay away. Please just listen," Ethan pleaded, swallowing his pride. "Ella doesn't want to marry Mr. Harrison. She's miserable. There must be another way. Look, I know I don't have much." He fumbled, pulling out the small roll of bills he'd carefully saved, his entire earnings as a mechanic. "But take this. It's all I have. Consider it a guarantee for her good behavior. Just please, call off the wedding. Give her time. Walter stared at the meager offering in Ethan's hand, then threw back his head and laughed, a harsh, grating sound utterly devoid of humor. Your savings. He sneered, his lip curling in disgust. Are you serious, boy? That pitiful amount wouldn't even cover the cost of the dirt on Mr. Harrison's shoes. You think this changes anything? You think you matter? He waved a dismissive hand. Get out of my sight, you pathetic worm, before I call the authorities on you for harassment. Ella belongs where I say she belongs. The raw contempt, the absolute dismissal, the cruel reminder of his perceived powerlessness. It snapped something inside Ethan. The humiliation burned, but beneath it, a cold, hard resolve began to form. He looked at Walter Miller, truly looked at him, and saw not just a cruel bully, but a man whose callousness demanded a response far beyond what Ethan, the mechanic, could offer. He turned away from Walter without another word. The charade was over. The risk to Ella's trust no longer outweighed the certainty of her destruction if he didn't act. As he walked back towards his small rented room, the grime on his hands felt alien. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was Ethan Sterling, and Ethan Sterling had the power to bring men like Walter Miller to their knees. The decision settled over him, calm and absolute. Tomorrow he would reclaim his name, his power, and he would save the woman he loved, no matter the cost. The morning air felt unnaturally still, heavy with unspoken dread. Inside the Miller house, final preparations were being made, not for a celebration, but for a sacrifice. Ella, dressed in a simple, borrowed dress, sat numbly on her bed in the locked room, the faint sounds from downstairs sealing her fate. Today she was supposed to become Mrs. Harrison. Outside, Walter Miller adjusted his tie, a smug sense of satisfaction settling on his features. He had won. The troublesome niece would be dealt with, handed off to a man who wouldn't tolerate any nonsense, and he would be free of her Aunt Martha, bustled nervously, while Clara preened slightly, perhaps anticipating a life with less competition under her roof. Then a sound disrupted the tense quiet, the low, powerful purr of an expensive engine. A sleek obsidian-black sedan, utterly alien to this modest street, glided to a halt directly in front of the house. Walter frowned, annoyed by the intrusion. Who would dare? The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. Walter's annoyance shifted to disbelief, then contemptuous amusement. It was the mechanic Ethan, but not as he'd ever seen him. Gone were the greasy overalls and worn boots. Today he wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, polished Italian leather shoes, and a watch on his wrist that subtly gleamed with the unmistakable glint of platinum and old money. He moved with an easy confidence, an inherent authority that seemed to emanate from him. Before Walter could process this transformation, the passenger door opened, and an older gentleman, equally well-dressed and carrying an air of quiet dignity, stepped out beside him. Arthur Sterling. Walter blinked, momentarily confused, then scoffed. Well, he sneered, stepping onto the porch flanked by Martha and Clara, who had emerged curious. Look what the cat dragged in, still crawling back for more mechanic, dressed up in a costume. Now did you borrow your boss's car for one last pathetic attempt? Ethan Sterling ignored the mockery. He walked calmly up the path, his father beside him, stopping a few feet from the porch. His gaze was level, unnervingly calm. Actually, Mr. Miller, Ethan said, his voice, even but carrying a new resonance. We need to discuss Ella's future. A future arranged by her, not by you. A future that certainly doesn't involve Mr. Harrison. Walter threw back his head and laughed, a forced, ugly sound. Martha and Clara tittered behind him. "Discuss you think you're in a position to discuss anything. Who do you think you are?" He jabbed a finger towards Ethan. "Playing dress-up won't change the fact that you're nobody." Ethan simply reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a slim, elegant card holder. He extracted a card and held it out. "Ethan Sterling," he stated calmly. "And this is my father, Arthur Sterling." Walter squinted at the card, then roared with laughter. Again, Sterling like Sterling Industries. "You expect me to believe this farce? A Sterling wouldn't be caught dead, changing oil filters. This is pathetic. Get off my property before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing and impersonation." "That won't be necessary," Ethan replied coolly, glancing towards the street. "I took the liberty of informing them they might be needed." As if on cue, a standard police cruiser turned onto the street. It didn't speed, didn't flash its lights, but pulled up smoothly behind the Sterling sedan. Two officers emerged, their expressions initially routine, but as they approached and saw who was standing there, their demeanor shifted instantly. The senior officer's eyes widened slightly in recognition, particularly as he took in Arthur Sterling. He straightened his posture, his hand instinctively moving towards his cap in a gesture of respect. "Mr. Sterling, sir," the officer addressed Arthur. First, then nodded towards Ethan. "Good morning. Is everything all right? Is there a problem here we can assist you with?" The casual deference, the immediate recognition. It was unmistakable. Walter Miller froze mid-rant. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a pasty grey. Martha gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest, her smugness evaporating like mist. Clara's jaw literally dropped, her eyes wide, with utter disbelief, fixed on the man she'd scorned as a dirty mechanic. The shift in power was instantaneous, brutal and absolute. Walter began to stammer, his bluster vanishing. "Officer, there's no problem here. Just a misunderstanding. This young man was just leaving." Martha, quicker to grasp the terrifying reality, practically stumbled down the porch steps, her face contorted in a mask of fawning terror. "Oh, Mr. Sterling." "Sir, please forgive my husband. We didn't know. We had no idea. Just a terrible mistake." Her voice was high-pitched, desperate. The fierce shrew from the auto shop was gone, replaced by a cringing supplicant. Ethan regarded their panicked faces with cold disdain. He turned to the senior police officer. "Officer," he said, his voice clear and commanding, cutting through Walter's stammering. "I have concrete reason to believe that Walter Miller and his wife are unlawfully imprisoning their niece, Miss Ella Miller, in this house. They have subjected her to physical abuse, and they are attempting to force her into a marriage today, against her will." To a Mr. Harrison, Arthur Sterling stepped forward slightly, his presence adding undeniable weight. "My son has outlined the situation correctly. Officer," he stated, his voice calm but firm, "we require your immediate assistance to ensure Miss Miller's safety and well-being." He then glanced at Ethan, a flicker of dry approval in his eyes. "Well, Ethan," he murmured, just loud enough for his son to hear, "you certainly know how to handle delicate negotiations." Ethan's attention snapped back to Walter, who was now trembling visibly, his face slick with sweat. "Where is Ella, Ethan?" demanded his voice, dropping devoid of heat but filled with chilling authority. "I want to see her now." The command hung in the air, absolute and unarguable. The game was over. The masks were off, and Ethan Sterling, backed by the weight of his name and the authority of the law he had summoned, was now entirely in control. Walter and Martha could only stare, trapped in the wreckage of their own cruelty and greed, awaiting his next move, with Walter and Martha Miller stunned into silence under the watchful eyes of the police and the formidable presence of the Sterlings. The first priority was Ella. An officer gently removed the crude board from her window. Another unlocked the door. Ethan pushed past his father and the officers entering the dim, stuffy room. Ella looked up, her eyes wide and fearful. Still bruised from Walter's calculated cruelty, the sight of Ethan, not the mechanic but this commanding, unfamiliar version, seemed to momentarily confuse her before relief flooded her face. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. He rushed to her side, kneeling, taking her gently by the shoulders. "Ella, it's okay. You're safe now. I promise you you're safe." He carefully helped her to her feet, supporting her frail weight. She leaned against him, a shuddering sob escaping her. Outside, Arthur Sterling was already speaking quietly but firmly with the senior police officer. "My son suspects this abuse is not an isolated incident. We request a thorough investigation into Walter Miller's affairs, including the circumstances surrounding the death of Miss Miller's parents years ago." The officer, recognizing the gravity and the influence behind the request, nodded seriously. "Consider it done, Mr. Sterling." Paramedics were discreetly summoned to check Ella over confirming bruises and dehydration, but thankfully, no life-threatening injuries. Wrapped in a warm blanket provided by one of the officers, Ella was gently escorted past her now cowering aunt and uncle, who were being formally detained for questioning regarding unlawful imprisonment and assault. Clara watched them being led away, her face pale and utterly lost. Ethan stayed close by Ella's side, shielding her protectively, as his father arranged immediate, secure accommodation for her at a private suite far from the remnants of her past life. Introducing Ella to his mother, Eleanor Sterling, back at the Grand Sterling estate, a day later, was tense. Eleanor, though visibly disturbed by the account of Ella's ordeal, still held a certain reserve. The bruises on Ella's face were stark reminders of a world far removed from her own, and perhaps a subconscious confirmation of her initial prejudices about incompatible backgrounds. She was polite, offering condolences and comforts, but a wall remained. Arthur, however, was unwavering in his warmth and support for Ella, treating her with the kindness of a daughter. Later that evening, he spoke privately with his wife. "Eleanor," he said gently, "I understand your reservations, but look at that young woman. Look at her resilience, her quiet strength after enduring horrors we can barely imagine. Does her background truly matter more than her character? Does it matter more than our son's happiness?" He paused, then added with a wry twist of his lips, "And my dear, must I remind you that even the most brilliant diamonds were once just lumps of coal under pressure?" Eleanor had no immediate reply, but the words clearly struck a chord, leaving her in quiet contemplation. The investigation into Walter Miller, propelled by the Sterling's resources and the police's renewed focus, moved swiftly. Financial records were scrutinized, old acquaintances questioned, dormant files reopened. It didn't take long for the horrifying truth to surface, more damning than Ethan had even suspected. Concrete evidence emerged: forged documents, suspiciously timed transactions, testimonies from individuals Walter had silenced years ago, proving that Walter Miller had orchestrated the accidental deaths of his own brother and sister-in-law to seize control of their modest but promising business and assets. Ella's subsequent mistreatment hadn't just been cruelty. It had been a calculated effort to control and suppress the rightful heir he had orphaned. As the full monstrous truth came to light, any remaining reservations Eleanor Sterling held crumbled into dust, replaced by profound shame and deep compassion for Ella. Seeing the gentle young woman grapple with this new, devastating knowledge about her parents, witnessing her quiet dignity in the face of unimaginable betrayal, melted the last vestiges of Eleanor's snobbery. She approached Ella one afternoon, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Ella, my dear," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "I owe you the most profound apology. I judged you unfairly, blinded by my own foolish pride. What you have endured, and the grace with which you carry yourself. I was wrong, so very wrong. If you'll let me, I would be honored to welcome you truly into this family." Ella, surprised and deeply moved by the genuine remorse in Eleanor's voice, accepted the apology, a significant step in her own healing journey. The trial was swift. Faced with irrefutable evidence of kidnapping conspiracy, decades of abuse, embezzlement, and the cold-blooded murders of Ella's parents, Walter and Martha Miller had no defense. The judge, citing their calculated cruelty and utter lack of remorse, delivered the sentence 170 years in prison, without the possibility of parole. Justice, delayed for years, had finally been served. Clara, initially questioned by police, avoided major charges due to lack of direct involvement in the murders or kidnapping plot. But the truth about her parents and the complete implosion of her life left her shattered. The trial's aftermath forced a harsh reckoning. Some time later, humbled and adrift, she sought out Ella, but instead of just tears, she offered something tangible. A small, tarnished silver locket, one she knew had belonged to Ella's mother, which Clara had selfishly kept hidden away for years. "I know this isn't enough," Clara whispered, pressing the locket into her hand, tears streaming down her face. "But it's hers. It belongs with you. I am truly sorry. For everything." Seeing this concrete act, this step beyond mere words, Ella felt a flicker of something other than bitterness. Healing wasn't forgetting, but perhaps it could involve letting go of consuming anger. She accepted the locket, offering Clara a quiet, measured forgiveness that felt earned, not simply given. Time became a gentle healer. Supported by Ethan's unwavering love, Arthur's quiet wisdom, and Eleanor's now genuine warmth, Ella slowly began to reclaim her life. She started baking again, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, filling the Sterling kitchen with aromas that spoke of hope and quiet passion. She started therapy to process the deep trauma, finding her voice step by step. Their wedding, when it finally happened, months later, wasn't a rushed affair or an ostentatious display. It was an elegant, heartfelt celebration, held in the Sterling gardens, bathed in the warm glow of the afternoon sun. It was a testament to love's endurance, a celebration of survival and new beginnings. Ella, radiant in a simple yet stunning gown, walked down the aisle towards Ethan, her eyes meeting his, reflecting a love that had been tested by fire and emerged unbreakable. Arthur stood proudly beside his son, while Eleanor wiped away happy tears, her acceptance complete and joyful. Even Clara was there, seated discreetly towards the back, a quiet observer witnessing the happiness she had once tried to spoil, now seemingly content in her own quiet journey of making amends. During the reception, amidst the joyful guests and clinking glasses, Ethan momentarily fumbled while trying to cut the intricate wedding cake, much to Ella's soft, amused laughter. "Still need some practice outside the garage." "Mr. Sterling," she teased gently, her eyes sparkling. He grinned back, pulling her close. "Only when I'm distracted by the most beautiful sight in the world," he replied, capturing her lips in a tender kiss. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, Ethan and Ella stood, hand in hand, looking out at their guests, at their family. the one they had fought so hard to build. The scars of the past remained, perhaps they always would, but they no longer defined them. They had faced the darkness and found their way back to the light together. Theirs was not a fairy tale ending handed to them, but a peaceful harbor they had reached through courage, resilience, justice, and a love that proved stronger than any shadow. Their journey was just beginning, but they faced it with open hearts, secure in the knowledge that they had truly earned their peace. What an incredible journey of darkness and light we've just witnessed, from the depths of cruelty and despair to the triumph of love and justice. Ethan and Ella's story truly touches the heart. It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? How much can a gentle spirit endure before it breaks? Ella's path reminds us that true strength isn't about avoiding scars, but about the courage to heal and choose kindness even after immense suffering. Perhaps her quiet resilience, or Ethan's search for something real beyond riches, resonates with experiences in our own lives or the lives of those we know. That deep human yearning for connection, for a love that sees our true worth beneath the surface, no matter the circumstance. This powerful journey of love, betrayal, and incredible strength certainly left us with many reflections, and we hope it touched you deeply as well. It sparks so many questions about what truly matters. We'd love to hear your perspective. What do you believe truly defines a person's worth? Their external circumstances, or the kindness and character held within? And thinking about the paths of characters like Eleanor or Clara, is forgiveness always possible or earned even after profound mistakes or betrayal? Share your deepest reflection on this in the comments below. Let's explore these ideas together. We are also constantly striving to bring you more compelling and meaningful stories, and your feedback is invaluable to that process. We would be so grateful for your constructive thoughts. If any part of today's storytelling resonated strongly, or if you have ideas on how we can improve future narratives, please don't hesitate to share your suggestions in the comments. Your insights truly help us grow and create better content for you. If Ella and Ethan's hard-won happiness moved, you please give this video a thumbs up. It lets us know and helps others discover their story. If you feel this message of hope and resilience could brighten someone else's day, please share it with them. And of course, if you'd like to join us for more emotional journeys and stories that explore the complexities of the human heart, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us today. Until our next story, stay kind, stay hopeful, and take care.